For professional athletes, sometimes it's hard to hear criticism about your game, but other times it is exactly what you need to hear. And in the case of Stanley Johnson, that reigns true after Masai Ujiri gave him some brutal honesty as he left the Toronto Raptors. So in today's video, we discuss why Stanley Johnson is good enough for the Lakers, but not good enough for the Raptors. Let's get into it. Welcome, NBA and Raptors fans, to Amateur Hour Sports, the channel where you get NBA content with a focus on the Toronto Raptors at least 4 times a week. So if you like what you see from today's video, then make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Check out all the videos we have coming your way, and you can help us on a road to 8,000 subscribers. Today's video isn't quite fully Raptors based. There is a big focus on the Lakers in this one, but there are obviously Raptor ties, as you can expect on Amateur Sports. Stanley Johnson yesterday revealed what Masai Ujiri told him as he was leaving the Raptors. And it wasn't Stanley Johnson's choice to leave the Raptors, because Masai Ujiri was brutally honest with the player and straight up told him he wasn't good enough. And to quote Stanley Johnson, apparently he said he was bad at basketball. And after his time with the Raptors, over the course of this video, understand every single player in the NBA is good at basketball. But in context to the rest of the NBA landscape, maybe Stanley Johnson is bad at basketball. Because let's take a look at the stats that he displayed with the Raptors. He played 86 games in his career with the Raptors, where he averaged 3.8 points, 2.2 rebounds, and just about 1 assist on 38% shooting from the field and 32% shooting from 3. The Raptors signed Stanley Johnson for the 2019-2020 season. He was coming off of his rookie contract and didn't really know if he had a real place in the NBA. He was drafted 8th overall by the Detroit Pistons, where he spent about 3.5 seasons, finished his final year of his rookie contract with the Pelicans, and there wasn't really much to display and much to show for that time in the NBA for Stanley Johnson. But the Raptors, they were coming off that NBA championship. They needed to add in a little more net depth to their bench. And Stanley Johnson was kind of that guy. He was in like the 11 to 15 range in the rotation, only really ever saw the court in garbage time. But that role had to grow for the 2020-21 season, where the Raptors were really struggling. They dealt with a lot of players going into health and safety protocols, and they dealt with a lot of injuries. Stanley Johnson got plenty of opportunity for the Raptors. And, there were some one-off really good games, like that 35 performance he had later on in the season. But ultimately, his performances left a lot to be desired. He came into the league as, a real slashing talent, but that just wasn't really apparent in his game at the NBA level. Sure, he could get to the rim and sometimes put it in, but he was a very inconsistent shooter and very inconsistent all around offensively. The only real claim to his game is the fact that he's, a solid defender. He's good. He's a good defender. He's not like an exceptional defender, but he's a guy that he's out there and you see, okay, he looks like a pretty good defender. So Masai Ujiri was straight up with him. Masai Ujiri, I would say, typically is honest with his players. I think sometimes that really isn't the case, but I feel like he wants the best for the guys who are with the organization, even the guys who leave the organization. He wants the best for them. And when Stanley Johnson was leaving the team, I guess this was the meeting where Masai decided to move on from a player. Masai told him straight up he was bad at basketball, or he wasn't good enough. I don't really have the direct quote, but according to Stanley Johnson, it was, "You're bad at basketball." So that is why Stanley Johnson left the team. Masai Ujiri decided he wasn't good enough to play for the Raptors. Stanley Johnson found himself on the Bulls in the offseason, where he played 4 preseason games before the Bulls decided wasn't good enough for their team either. So Stanley Johnson wanted to get himself back in the league. And I think for a lot of players, these sort of occurrences can really shape what you're going to be in the future. Because for Stanley Johnson, 6 seasons in the NBA and not much to show for it. I think, at 25 years old, only 25 years old, there's room to grow, but he was wondering if he would have a future in basketball. And this is kind of the daunting thing for a lot of NBA players. We think about all the really good players, even just role players. They're going to consistently find themselves in NBA teams. But for the lower tier players like Stanley Johnson, it's not a given that every season you're going to have a contract to play in the NBA. So you really got to work for it. And maybe Stanley Johnson felt a little bit comfortable after his season with the Raptors. And, Masai Ujiri's conversation with him really let him know, I need to play better or else I'm not in the NBA anymore. He found himself a spot in the G League where he was impressive enough for the Lakers to give him a chance. And that Christmas Day game is kind of what really got us noticing Stanley Johnson, because the Lakers desperately needed a player like that. And just going back to my point, sometimes that's what players need to hear. Sometimes players don't take it well. And I would say the ones who don't take criticism typically don't succeed a lot, unless you're just, insanely talented already. And I think a really good example of this, let's talk about Cam Payne, who had so many different opportunities with teams. He had opportunities with the Raptors, opportunities with the Bulls. And, when the Raptors signed Cam Payne, my thought process in that situation was, wow, we just signed like the worst point guard in the NBA. Now we're looking at Cam Payne like a guy who can contribute to even a contender in the playoffs. I don't think, he's like that level, but we just saw him playing the playoffs with the Phoenix Suns, who got to the NBA Finals, won 2 games in the NBA Finals, and Cam Payne was a consistent contributor off the bench. And even when Chris Paul was out injured, he was a consistent contributor from the starting lineup. So you can look at former teams like, why would you give that player away? Look how good he is now. But sometimes that player getting cut, that player leaving your team is exactly what they need to find the next level of their game. Don't know if that's true for Stanley Johnson, but he is certainly making a case to get signed to the rest of the season for the Lakers, because the Lakers, obviously on paper, extremely talented team. LeBron, AD, Russell Westbrook. You got Carmelo Anthony, who's playing well early on the season, like Malik Monk having a career year. There is a lot of talent on this team. I mean, obviously, you've got those 3 absolute superstars, according to their contracts, in LeBron, Anthony Davis, and Russell Westbrook. That team should be at the top or near the top of the Western Conference. But right now, they are under 500 and 8 in the Western Conference. And having watched Lakers games throughout the season, I have an interest in the team. Obviously, I'm a Raptors fan, but just kind of wanting to see what's going on with the Lake show. And there's obviously talent there. What there isn't is the will and the desire to win games. It's easy for players to say after games in press conferences, we're working hard. Obviously, we want to win. But the evidence on the court, you're not hustling back. You're not hustling to make the plays on defense. It's very clear, and it's very clear very quickly for this Lakers team. So as much as they want to say in press conferences, they're working hard and they're doing all this, you got to show it. You have to show it on the court. And I think a lot of the losses and a lot of the ugly losses throughout the season have been as a result of just a lack of will to work hard on the court. Stanley Johnson is somebody who maybe lacks a bit of talent, or definitely lacks a little bit of talent, but maybe that conversation with Masai Ujiri made him understand his role a bit better. How is Stanley Johnson going to keep himself relevant in the NBA? Maybe he had a good, hard look at himself in the mirror, processed what he could do. What can he bring to a team? And the 2 best things he has are defense and hustle. Works hard. Undoubtedly a player that works hard. And like I said earlier in the video, a decent defender. The Lakers are missing, I think, 2 things: defense and work ethic. Stanley Johnson can bring you that hustle. Stanley Johnson can bring you that defense. That's why he looked so good on Christmas Day, because Lakers fans who've been watching a team basically look like they're not trying all season on defense, saw somebody sprint, saw somebody make some big plays, saw somebody do some great work defending James Harden in that game. And from that point forth, that was Stanley Johnson's role with the team. It earned him a second 10-day contract. And just a couple games ago for the Lakers, he had 15 points on 7 for 9 shooting. It's not going to be every game that he gives you the offensive prowess that maybe he was drafted 8th overall for. But Stanley Johnson, every single game, is going to give you the hustle, and he's going to just do his best on defense. And you can trust him to do that every game. Chris Boucher's resurgence with the Raptors this season has come from, now we know we're going to get every game. Boucher is going to crash the boards, and he's going to hustle his ass off. And these things make him a better player. You don't need to be the most talented player to do these things. Stanley Johnson, I guess, is starting to understand this. And I think the Lakers could heavily profit from having this guy with their team for the rest of the season. I don't see a lot of harm. I don't think you have to overpay him or anything. If there's room on that roster, this Lakers team could use some help. I think Stanley Johnson does something for that team that nobody else right now is doing. I think there's going to be some wholesale changes for the Lakers as we approach the trade deadline. I'm talking 2018 Cavs trade deadline levels, just rinsing out the roster. But I think as it goes for Stanley Johnson, That's somebody who can contribute for your team as a hustle player, as a defender. The Raptors don't need that. He's not good enough for the Raptors because we don't need that. We have so many guys who just hustle. We have so many just good defenders. What we need is scoring. What we need is guys who are going to create their own shot. Stanley Johnson didn't do that. The Lakers, they got plenty of guys who create their own shot, plenty of guys who can put the ball in the basket. They don't have that defender. They don't have that hustle guy like Stanley Johnson. So he's a great fit for them, not a great fit for the Raptors. And the Raptors right now at 500, we could use a lot of help with the bench, but Stanley Johnson wouldn't provide that. And I was a big advocate for getting rid of Stanley Johnson in the offseason. So looking at Stanley Johnson, Lakers should sign him for the rest of the season. And just because Stanley Johnson is playing well now, doesn't mean he would help out the Raptors. I haven't really seen a lot of people saying, oh, wow, we got rid of Stanley Johnson. Look at him now. But I'm sure some of you guys are out there. So I wish the best for Stanley Johnson. I hold no grudges just because the guy didn't play well for my team. I hope he succeeds. And I think the Lakers should definitely keep this guy for the rest of the season. So what have you guys made of Stanley Johnson's performances throughout the season? Do you think it's because of Masai Ujiri's conversation with him? Do you think it's just because he knows NBA career's on the line? A bit of both. And should the Lakers sign him for the rest of the season? I want to hear your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. But that is the end of today's video. If you made it to the end, that deserves a like. Let's get this video to 150 likes to make sure that I know you're enjoying the videos and you can help reach some other viewers for the channel. And make sure that if you're new and you did enjoy, you want to see more videos like this, you subscribe to the channel. We're getting so close to 8,000 subscribers, and I would really appreciate if you did help us get there. I'll see you again next time for another video.